I really do love my home. It's the house that my husband grew up in, and I have hung out there since I was a teenager. We moved into the bottom floor when our son was an infant. It is a great arrangement. My in-laws live right upstairs and are always helping out with our son. The downstairs is its own complete apartment with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. It is connected to the upstairs with a staircase in the corner of the living room, with a door at the top going into the upper floor of the house. The stairs run behind and above a storage closet, so they aren't visible from the room unless you are directly in front of them. Like I said, I love this house and feel completely safe here. When I am by myself downstairs, I usually don't have many issues, but when no one is home upstairs, it gives me the creeps. There isn't any specific reason for this, just a general unease when I am alone up there. I know that he usually hangs out up there and leaves everyone else alone, but occasionally, he comes into our house and wants to hang out. My husband was the first one who told me about him. Now, my husband is the very last person who I would ever expect to believe in anything supernatural. And when he saw him, he didn't really see him as a specific form. I have a history of being a little more sensitive to things that are otherworldly, so I have always thought if I ignored it, maybe I wouldn't have to encounter it. I grew up in a religious house that was under a lot of spiritual warfare, my mother's words, and had seen, heard, experienced more fear than a child should be exposed to, causing me to have a fear of the dark that still haunts my adulthood. Before we moved into the house, we stayed there while his parents were away on vacation. One night as we went to bed, my husband came into the room and very nonchalantly mentioned that he was walking through the kitchen and thought he saw a shadow figure in front of the pantry where the fridge is and where the back stairs come into the house. He said that it was in front of the fridge, turned and walked down the stairs, disappearing from sight. My husband likes to mess with me sometimes, so I just laughed it off and nervously went to sleep. A few months later, after forgetting about the incident, I was chatting with my sister-in-law. She and her husband, my husband's brother, were living downstairs for a long time before we moved there. Somehow, the conversation moved to the supernatural, and she told me about what she had experienced in the house. She and her husband were night owls. Often they would stay up really late and at times fall asleep on the sofa watching a show. She really tried to go to sleep in her bed though, and would go in there to sleep on her own if her husband was still busy. She said that on more than one occasion, she would feel someone sit down on the corner of the bed. Whenever it would happen, she would look over the covers expecting to see a cat or her husband, but there would never be anyone there. If she called out to her husband, he would come in and confirm that he hadn't been in there and that both of the cats were by his side the whole time in the living room. She half laughed it off, saying that she thought it was an old man that likes to watch her sleep. Later that year, my brother-in-law had his own experience. His wife was traveling for a month overseas and he was alone but for the 2 cats. One late night, he was sitting with the 2 cats on the sofa. He was getting ready to turn off the TV and go to bed. All of a sudden, the rocking chair across the room started to rock. It was one of those big, heavy wooden rocking chairs that is perfect for a large man to sit in, so it wasn't something that moved really easily. He said he just sat there for about a minute while it rocked back and forth. Then it just stopped as suddenly as it started. Once again, I didn't really think about the story since I didn't spend much time in the house on my own up to that point. But once we moved into the apartment, it didn't take too long for him to make himself known. One late night, my husband and I were watching TV with most of the lights off. The sofa is across the room from the opening of the bottom of the stairs. You can see the bottom 3, then disappear behind the wall and turn up to the upper level. For some reason, I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. It wasn't a bad feeling, just a knowledge that pulled me from being engrossed in the show and snapped me into awareness of my surroundings. As I scanned the room, I froze when I reached the stairs. At first, I thought that my father-in-law was standing on the stairs peeking around the corner at us from a few stairs up. This is something that he often does when he comes down to visit my son. But as the face came more into focus, I realized that it was an unknown older man looking at us. He had a scruffy white beard and a cap like an old English paperboy. He had a half smile on his face and we locked eyes for about 30 seconds. I remember time felt like it stopped as I just stared at this little old man that was staring back at me. When I came back to my senses, I quickly looked away, and when I looked back, he was gone. I don't know why, but I didn't say anything to my husband. It didn't feel like the old man had any negative feelings associated with him, and I didn't feel anxious or very afraid, just satisfied that I had finally seen who everyone else had seen. Our apartment has a long hallway from the living room that leads to the bathroom on one side and then the 2 bedrooms on the other side. At the end of the hall is another door leading to the garage. As my son got older, this hallway became a play area for him. It was an easy option for a place to keep him occupied and safe with baby gates and all the doors. I could do chores while he played. My son was a really early talker. He started talking around 10 months ago. By the time he was 18 months, he was really good at communicating and had a very extensive vocabulary. But one day he said a word that no one ever had taught him before. I was washing dishes, listening to his toddler conversation with himself, smiling about how sweet it was. He has always loved talking with his stuffed animals. Both my husband and father-in-law give them voices, and they are a big part of my son's imaginative play. As I was half listening to him, I realized he was talking to someone. Figuring it was another moment of imaginative play, I asked him, "Who are you talking to?" "The ghost," he replied. At that moment, I felt like I was doused with a bucket of cold water. No one talks about ghosts with my son. There wasn't any reason that he would know the word or even what a ghost was. But I didn't want to scare him by reacting in any different kind of way, so I just said, "Oh, say hi to him for me." Even today, now that my son is 3.5, if you ask him who he was talking to in the hall that day, he remembers talking to the ghost. Now that he has gotten older and knows more about what ghosts are, only because of children's stories like Casper or because of Halloween, he still insists that he used to talk to ghosts. I have had a few more encounters with him on my own. One weekend, my in-laws and my husband were all out of town. I was alone with my son and my nephew for the night. I decided to have the 3 of us sleep in the same bed since it was just us, and we have a big king-size mattress. At that point, the head of the bed was against the wall of the hallway, and the door was to the right of the bed, the side I sleep on. Around 3 a.m. I woke up. I didn't know what woke me. I was just suddenly wide awake, and then I heard it. Footsteps of a full-grown man walking down the hall. My back was to the door, which was slightly open. The steps stopped at the door and I felt someone looking in at me. I knew that no one had broken in because we have gates on our doors that are loud, no matter how quiet you are trying to be, and the windows are really secure, so I would have heard something. So I immediately knew who it was walking down the hall. I pulled courage from the deep pit of my stomach and said, "I don't want to talk to you right now, old man. I am trying to sleep." A few seconds later, it felt like the presence was gone and I was able to settle back into sleep quickly. The next time everyone but myself and our son were gone for the weekend, I knew that I would probably have another visit. I think that he can sense my unease at being alone in the whole house. Once again, late that night when I went to the bathroom, I thought I heard a whisper from the living room. I quickly finished my business and walked back to bed. With my back turned to the living room, I quietly said, "Please let me sleep. I feel like we have come to a happy agreement that I accept him in our home, as long as he doesn't do anything to scare me. I'm really scared of the dark, and am worried that I will just see him standing around sometimes as I turn off all the lights and head to bed. But I rarely get that ominous feeling that something else is around. I don't know much about living with a spirit that doesn't want to harm, but he seems innocent enough in any interaction that people have had with him. I still get creeped out upstairs when I am alone. Maybe he's watching more up there. And I try not to be up there for too long when I do need to be up there when no one else is around. But I don't feel like he is evil or trying to do anything bad, just that he is holding on to something in this realm. There are plenty of places around my city and neighborhood that I get bad feelings near, but not inside my home. My home is safe. It is just haunted by one friendly ghost.